A dear friend, he spoke on the stage before, talking from Metaplan, and I asked him, what's the hardest problem? And he was honestly running out of Bitcoin.
That's the Bitcoin effect, and this is just the beginning.
Thank you, Jeff. Now, let's keep it going with more bold predictions, beginning with every company will be a Bitcoin treasury company. Please welcome the legendary Adam Back, co-founder and CEO of Blockstream, and Tyler Evans, CIO of Kite MD. 接下来我们有更多大胆的预测。首先是每一家公司最后都会成为比特币服务公司。欢迎 Blockstream 的联合创办人兼 CEO 全球人物 Adam Back 和 Kite MD 的 CIO Tyler Evans。欢迎我们嘉宾 ，Welcome。
Right, thank you everyone. We've got a very fun discussion today about what's been one of the hottest trends of the last couple months in Bitcoin treasury companies. And I'm joined by a true legend in the Bitcoin space, Adam Back. Better known for his work around cryptography and some of the underpinnings of Bitcoin. So I kind of wanted to start there, Adam. Like you've had literally a history in Bitcoin since the beginning. And are much more known for your technical contributions to Bitcoin. What kind of piqued your interest in the financialization and the treasury company theme?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually an active trader in the mid-90s, kind of a day trader, then a value investor, and had an interest in macroeconomics and trading and the concept of trying to preserve your savings against inflation. And so, you know, I sort of put trading aside while I was focusing on my career in kind of cryptography and startup environment. So, you know, then started Blockstream, got involved with Bitcoin. In 2014, Blockstream was started, and then, of course, Michael Saylor started his treasury play, and so I thought that was an interesting and valuable undertaking because he was sort of leading by example and then started a conference series to try and show other public market companies how you do it, because you know, looking at it from the outside, you think, well, just buy Bitcoin and cold store it. But for a public company, it's not quite that simple because you have to, you know, you have an auditor, you have to explain the account, you have to figure out the accounting. Maybe you have to use an independent custodian because the auditor requires it and your shareholders expect it. So there are a number of things they had to go through to actually get it done. And he was interested to sort of promote that concept to other public companies. And so, you know, at some point in there, I bought some of his shares because I thought, you know, I wanted to support what he's doing. And if a lot of Bitcoiners bought a little bit of his shares, you know, his market cap was a lot smaller than Bitcoin, so it wouldn't take that many Bitcoiners, there are lots of Bitcoiners, if they bought a little bit of his shares, you provide some kind of financial support that if Wall Street didn't like his strategy, the Bitcoiners would buy the shares off them, right? So that was the concept, but now, of course, he famously you know, was sort of relentless buyer. You know, he would buy Bitcoin and you think, oh, he's got to be out of firepower, and then he'd do it again and again and again and again. So he's really explored the full spectrum of different ways that public companies can access capital, and I think that's been useful. It surprised me a little bit how long it took before any other public companies joined. Now, of course, today, that's turned around, and there are a lot of public companies and a very fast pace of new entrants coming to the market.
And, you know, I guess from your entire history in Bitcoin and all the developments you've seen, were you expecting the, I guess, commercial, corporate, institutional adoption to happen in this way?
Yeah, I mean, I think effectively, you know, everybody who's investing in Bitcoin, you know, they're looking at it from various perspectives, but effectively you're participating in an arbitrage between the mispricing of Bitcoin today and its, you know, its potential value in the future. And so, you know, effectively Bitcoin is the hurdle rate, meaning that, you know, if you're doing saving in some other asset or, you know, via a professional fund manager, if they're not keeping up with Bitcoin's performance over the long term, you should probably stop there and buy Bitcoin instead, right? And so
it's a lot less work.
Say again?
It's a lot less work.
Yeah, and so I mean, it's proven to be extremely difficult to outperform Bitcoin over the last decade. You know, most people who invested in startups, even Bitcoin startups, or did any other kind of investing, they typically realized afterwards they should have just bought Bitcoin and held it, right? And so with that backdrop, the question is, how should people operate a company? And so, you know, Michael Saylor started that journey just as a defensive method to protect the spending power of their cash reserves. But actually, if you think about it, the only way for generally a company to, you know, match Bitcoin or even potentially outperform Bitcoin is to buy Bitcoin and use the capital markets to try and increase the Bitcoin per share, operate their core business, take some of the profit, use that to buy Bitcoin, use some of the profit to expand their core business, their products, their services. So, from that point of view, I think eventually probably all companies will be Bitcoin treasury companies, eventually.
Well, I think that's the title of our discussion today. How do you see that playing out over the next, I guess Saylor's 5 years into the strategy? Where do you see this trend really going over the next 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one question I've heard from different kind of professional investors who are, just getting to grips with the treasury company playbook is they want to ask the question about how scalable the treasury company strategy is. And by that, they mean if there are more, if there are twice as many companies, will it become less effective? Will it saturate the market or something? And the scalability of a trade, at least in arbitrage, is a real phenomena because, if there's a mispricing, let's say the kimchi premium is an example, right? So in one country, Bitcoin is priced a bit more expensively because of some capital controls or other factors, and somebody will try to arbitrage it. And, if they put enough money into it, the opportunity will disappear and they will have made the market more efficient. So they're effectively asking a question like that. But I think the point is here, the mispricing is rather severe and it's an extremely large addressable market. So, of course, nobody knows today, exactly what the Bitcoin addressable market is going to be ultimately, but you can certainly see there's a lot of monetary premium in some extremely large asset classes like the fixed income world, real estate, and even the stock market. So you can see the US stock market is highly correlated to M2 monetary expansion. If you take that factor out of it, it's approximately flat, in fact, right? So effectively, probably what you're looking at is people just trying to protect their spending power by buying stocks. And if Bitcoin is able to replace that, that's actually a better thing for everybody, in fact, right? You get more accurate pricing, you get better enjoyment from real estate because it's not overpriced by being an investment asset, sure, and you get a better return on fixed income. So I think effectively my answer to the scalability is it's extremely scalable and could absorb, a lot of the free cash of some very cash-rich companies like Berkshire Hathaway, Apple, Microsoft. The size of that arbitrage could swallow that for breakfast and keep going and take a few decades to close the gap. So from that point of view, I think it's very scalable, and maybe there is some sort of positive reinforcement as well that the market is still trying to understand the treasury companies, trying to understand Bitcoin. So if things become widespread and common spread, that is sometimes what it takes for people to start to feel comfortable, to understand it, to have confidence, because they see other people adopting, other people investing. So, there are, of course, for people from a Bitcoin perspective, they're looking at Bitcoin, the asset class, electronic cash, self-sovereign money, and they wonder, what is this thing with public companies buying Bitcoin? But ultimately, the capital markets and the ability to organize economic activity in the form of a company is a big part of the world economy. It basically took human productivity to where it is today. So it's really a basic part of modern society and the ability to develop products. So I think it's quite natural that companies are going to want to participate there. And so it's just another part of Bitcoin adoption. It's a new vector of adoption. And you can see that the treasury companies collectively are a good part of the, purchasing, the inflow of new buying within the market. And of course, the ETFs are also absorbing a lot of Bitcoin quite quickly nowadays.
Well, they certainly have been a strong, sustained bidder in the Bitcoin market, which benefits the whole community of holders. But at the same time, there has been some pushback from the community that this kind of corporatism of Bitcoin is maybe antithetical to the grassroots, community-driven, the cypherpunk ethos of Bitcoin, if you will. What's your kind of perspective on that?
Well, I mean, I was involved with the cypherpunks a lot of, decade plus before Bitcoin, and so I do understand this perspective. And the electronic cash kind of interest within the cypherpunks that predates Bitcoin was about a similar concept to what's evolved in Bitcoin, which is it's self-sovereignty, your asset can't be seized. Now, of course, the e-cash systems of that time were effectively what we would call a stable coin today, so they didn't really have an investment aspect. So Bitcoin has an additional adoption driver, which is apart from the kind of permissionless innovation, unseizable asset, bearer cash, you have also an asset class, which is another driver because some people will buy or participate as an investment, but typically people who get involved with Bitcoin, it sort of changes their their time preference for longer, and makes sort of they learn things, they get interested to learn about inflation, about monetary theory, and so on. So I think ultimately, groups of humans are organized as companies. And of course, there are private companies which are a family business or a dental practice, and then you have small cap companies on the stock market and big public companies that are doing something much more ambitious, like a company like Intel, which is making CPUs, or AMD, and so on. So I think it's just a natural phenomena as Bitcoin continues to be adopted. I think the other sort of surprising thing in a positive sense is the incentives that make Bitcoin work. Originally, people mining, the fact that the sort of mining activity is interacting with the market for Bitcoin, that the incentives are what's holding it together, right? And it's interesting to see how scalable the incentives have proven to be, which is as the early stages of nation-state adoption, institutional adoption, now effectively Bitcoin, whether people expected it or not, has BlackRock and Larry Fink rooting for Bitcoin,
evangelizing
right?
it.
Yeah.
Well, we heard a little bit about your kind of discovery and supportive strategy, but since then you've become, I think, one of the most prolific, highest profile investors into Bitcoin treasury companies around the world. Kind of when did you make that jump, and what do you see really being the international opportunity?
I mean, I think it's been interesting, right? So, I described how I first got involved with treasury companies by trying to sort of philosophically support the mission that MicroStrategy was taking. And then, because I have a bit of a trading background, got involved in trading that. And I think when they first started, the MNAV concept wasn't really talked about, but, you can look at it, you can create those metrics on past data. So, I think then I invested in Metaplanet was the next one, and then more recently in some of the other European ones like Capital B and H100. So it's quite interesting because different markets have different opportunities. There's usually something specific where a domestic company is maybe more attractive to the local investors or the local Bitcoin investors. And I think that could be for a few reasons. One is, perhaps the local community knows the management team and they trust them, or there's some cultural aspect to it. But also, there are typically tax differences. So different countries have different tax rules. And so, sometimes there is a tax arbitrage in the treasury company where, the market doesn't have Bitcoin ETFs, let's say, and the tax treatment on Bitcoin is still out of date. And so you see that in Japan with Metaplanet, in France also, with capital B, there is some difference where you can hold shares that are French stocks in some kind of tax-advantaged account, which you can't do with Bitcoin. Other countries have similar situations going on, so that kind of is effectively a kind of arbitrage, and may eventually lead to improved tax treatment in the country. And of course, there are now more countries contemplating or working on approving ETFs. So I think in Hong Kong, for example, last year there were 3 ETFs introduced, which is fairly new, right? And I think Japan is also considering ETFs now. Not in market yet, and maybe there's still some work to do. But it's interesting to sort of participate in that, and at least for me, I've tended to invest in companies where I know the management team, or have confidence that the management team are Bitcoiners, they're going to stay on the Bitcoin mission, and they're going to use the capital they raised to buy Bitcoin, and not like lose focus or not invest in Bitcoin. So really, you want to, from my perspective, because it's a Bitcoin-related investment, I want to have confidence that they're going to stay on the mission, stay focused, and also, I guess, have the capability to raise money, because it is partly a capital raising process that is enabling the companies to increase their Bitcoin per share. So if the team has some capital raising experience and capability between the team or their advisors or banking partners or things like that. So yeah, and I think there also been a range of investment types. So MicroStrategy being the first has explored initially, well, firstly they used their cash reserves. Then they took out corporate bonds. Then they moved on to convertible notes, which are a little bit more beneficial because they were selling convertible notes at 50% conversion premium. So they could raise 150 million, buy Bitcoin with that, immediately. And if the conversion premium is reached, then they would only suffer $100 million worth of conversion. So you can see immediately that even if they started with a 1 times MNAV, that would still increase Bitcoin per share, right? Which you wouldn't be able to do with an ATM. And then, once the companies do have an MNAV premium, of course, they can do ATMs or ATM-like strategies and increase Bitcoin per share that way. And Metaplanet has been using moving strike warrants. Capital B has been using ATMs or something like it in France. And I think, of course, the last phenomena has been pioneered by MicroStrategy, or Strategy as it's called today, again, with the lineup of different preferred stocks they put in the market. They had 3 initially with kind of middling levels of capital market appetite, but the last one, STRC or Stretch, actually they sold a quite large amount, like over 2 billion in the first out of the gate, which is quite impressive. The other thing which I don't know if people are aware is that as well as the ATM on the common stock, where they're able to work with a banking partner to sell new shares into the market, is because the preferred shares are also listed instruments, they're able to apply for and get approval for an ATM on the preferred shares. Right. So I think that may not have taken full force yet, but once the market values and builds an appetite, if it does, for STRC, and I think they already have ATM approval on it, they can perhaps more efficiently and repeatedly raise capital by selling more STRC into an ATM market, where without that they otherwise have to engage bankers and find underwriters or large investment firms who will buy big tranches of it.
And I think we've seen some weeks where strategies run 4 or 5 ATMs concurrently, where they're selling across the entire universe of listed products. Well, Adam, we're almost out of time, but I wanted you to leave our audience with a little bit. You touched on kind of the qualitative framework for evaluating these companies, but you've done a lot of work on the quantitative side and the valuation methodologies, and I believe you're the creator of the months to cover metrics. So could you explain a little bit from a quantitative perspective how you invest or how you think about valuing these companies?
Yeah, I mean, the point with the months to cover metric was that if you're investing in treasury companies in different markets with different MNAVs, generally speaking, a higher MNAV is going to feel more risky because there's a prospect that the MNAV decays, and if it's 10, it's got a lot further to fall than if it's 2.
Right.
And so, the question is, how risky is that? And so one way to sort of risk adjust is to look at the months to cover. So what that's saying is how many, if you buy a treasury company at 5 times MNAV and they are increasing the Bitcoin per share, how long do you have to hold it for their historic rate of increase in Bitcoin per share to pay for that premium? And surprisingly, at the point I was doing this, MicroStrategy was, I think their MNAV was around 2 or 2.5, and their months to cover was about 18 months. And at that time, Metaplanet was 5, which felt riskier, but actually the months to cover were only 5 or 6 months.
Right.
And so you can see that if you kind of adjust for that, it gives you a different perspective on how to think about the MNAV, because I think if you are able to buy a treasury company and stay in market long enough so that you reach par, which is to say that for every Bitcoin worth of money that you use to buy the shares, you have shares that contain a Bitcoin worth of Bitcoin, then you're at a kind of 1 times MNAV configuration, even if the company is carrying a higher MNAV. And the interesting point is, you don't have to be an active trader. At that point, you can hold the company, and their ability to increase Bitcoin per share is actually working for you in a passive way, where you are more insulated against the MNAV compression. So, of course, you never know if the rate of increasing Bitcoin per share slows down, and there's an interplay between the MNAV and their ability to increase Bitcoin per share. So if the MNAV is lower, generally the capital market structures are not quite as effective at adding Bitcoin to the balance sheet.
Well, that's all we have time for, but thank you very much, Adam.
Thank you.
I'm Simon Garovich, president of Metaplanet. The global financial system is broken. Where can you build long-term value when every system is stacked against you? A year ago, we were running a struggling hotel company in Japan. So we flipped the model. We made Bitcoin our core reserve asset. Everything we do flows into a single goal, increasing Bitcoin per share. Today, we've become Asia's leading Bitcoin treasury company and the top performing listed equity in the world. Now, most companies fear volatility, but we harness it. Very few companies globally are compounding value at this pace and at this scale, and we have no intention of taking our foot off the gas. We believe we can redefine the market from the ground up, and our goal is to become the most held stock in Japan.
I've got a dear friend. He spoke on the stage before, Simon from Metaplanet, and I asked him, what's the hardest problem? And he goes, honestly, we're running out of Bitcoin.
That's the Bitcoin effect, and this is just the beginning.
Thank you, Adam and Tyler. So, if every company will eventually become a Bitcoin treasury company, then it is inevitable to ask how to value Bitcoin treasury companies. As more and more corporations are integrating Bitcoins into their balance sheets, understanding the true value becomes more and more important. 如果每家公司最后都会变成比特币的库物公司，而我们就要开始问另外一个问题：如何评估比特币库物公司的价值？ 尤其现在越来越多公司，他们已经把比特币纳入资产的负债表，了解他们的价值变得越来越重要。We'll have Adam Ham of Bitcoin for Corporations, Andrew Webley of the Smarter Web Company, Gabriel Aubrey of Kraken, and Matt Cole of Stripe to guide us through this exciting future of corporate Bitcoin adoption and investment. 我们邀请 Bitcoin for Corporations 的 Adam Ham, the Smarter Web Company 的 Andrew Webley, Kraken 的 Gabriel Aubrey 以及 Stripe 的 Matt Cole 带领我们探索企业比特币的采用和投资的未来。邀请我们的嘉宾 ，Welcome our guests.
Good afternoon, Hong Kong. How's everybody doing? Enjoying the conference? Yes? Oh, come on, wake up. Let me hear some more claps. It is truly an honor to speak here today, not just in the APAC region, but specifically Hong Kong, and to bring some of our members from the Bitcoin for Corporations Alliance up here, joined here by Strive, Kraken, and the Smarter Web Co. These guys are the pioneers shaping the corporate Bitcoin treasury adoption playbook, and I'm very happy to have this discussion today with them. But I'm going to let these gentlemen introduce themselves. Andrew, why don't we start with you?
My name's Andrew Webley. I'm the CEO of the Smarter Web Company, and we're the UK's largest public company holding Bitcoin on the balance sheet.
Hi, my name is Gurpreet Oberoi. I'm the head of Kraken Institutional.
Matt Cole, CEO of Strive. We are completing our reverse merger right now. If anyone happens to own shares of ASST, vote yes.
That is a great call to action, Matt. Why don't we give a little bit more context behind what the Smarter Web Co. is doing in the UK, Andrew, and then Gurpreet from Kraken Institutional side, how you guys are supporting these companies, and then Matt, of course, from the US angle. Andrew, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you. So I started my career in 1999, which was the early days of the internet. I worked at a small company that became a very big company, one of the biggest companies in the UK. Then I set up my own small technology business. I found Bitcoin about just under 10 years ago. And after seeing what Michael Saylor did with strategy, I felt that the UK should have its own version of strategy. So I listed my business on the stock market. We IPO'd in April this year, approximately 4 months ago. We've become a fairly large company now after raising approximately £200 million of capital. And in line with my personal beliefs, we hold our assets in Bitcoin, and we hold it with the idea that we grow it by increasing the Bitcoin yield that we can achieve.
Kraken has been very instrumental in the digital asset treasury strategies. We help custody, provide trading solutions, and also credit. I think a differentiator is, if somebody custodies a Kraken and say they want to borrow 10, 20, 30 million against their custody assets, we can structure bespoke solutions to the treasury solutions, and we can also help think through ways to help differentiate themselves amongst others.
Yeah, so for me, my background's fixed income. I used to run a $70 billion bond portfolio at the largest pension in America called CalPERS, and I had a direct line of access to the Federal Reserve, US Treasury, and I saw them gaslight me and trying to tell me that they weren't printing money. And it's this simple, that the only reason that technically what they said was true is that the Treasury would create new bonds, they would sell them to Goldman Sachs, and then Goldman Sachs would sell them to the Fed. If you take Goldman Sachs out of the equation, it was direct monetization of debt. And it was so obvious. And this was before I was a Bitcoiner, but it led me to put pretty much my entire net worth into Bitcoin late 2016, early 2017. And when I joined Strive in 2022, which was co-founded by Vivek Ramaswamy, principled on financial freedom, it was obvious for us to go into Bitcoin. And talking to Michael Saylor, initially it was not as a Bitcoin treasury company, and Michael Saylor was pretty blunt and just said, why aren't you just a Bitcoin treasury company? And like, yeah, that makes sense. Bitcoin's the hurdle rate. And so we adopted Bitcoin as the hurdle rate, which means that if we are going to put money to work, when we're putting that money to work, we don't think it's going to beat the future return of Bitcoin, 30%, 40%, 50% a year, then why aren't you just buying Bitcoin? And so for us as a Bitcoin treasury company, we are looking for ways to grow Bitcoin per share, the amount of Bitcoin each share of our company owns, which is like other Bitcoin treasury companies. And we're all approaching it from a little bit different angles. But just to give you a sense, I mean, I don't even think we've scratched the surface of the innovation that can happen in this space. And I don't think people understand the risks. And the risks are substantially less when you actually dig a little bit deeper in the debt that these companies are taking in the future returns. I think Strategy is literally a AAA rated issuer of debt, but yet they can't even get rated. That's how early we are.
So we're all Bitcoiners up here. Matt, I think you brought up a lot of great points that were at the very beginning. I mean, there's about, what, 300 companies that hold Bitcoin on the balance sheet, and maybe, what, 20 of them are running the Bitcoin accretive play. And it's very fascinating to see how everyone's coming to this realization that, like, hey, traditional instruments like treasury bonds are just not the place to park your excess cash reserves. And so we get into the main topic of our panel today is how do you actually value these Bitcoin treasury companies, right? And I think there's two main buckets to look at. First is the tangible, so the Bitcoin per share metric that you talked about. And you also hear people bring up MNAV, BTC torque, BTC yield, and some of these other things. And it's another language maybe to the retail side of stuff. But even for traditional financial professionals coming in, you know, I think it's important to set the baseline for what these KPIs are. So Andrew, I want to throw it to you. When you look at Bitcoin treasury companies, what are the core KPIs investors should focus on? Is it Bitcoin per share? Is it MNAV? Is it BTC yield? And what do your investors and shareholders seem to care about the most at the end of the day?
So this could be a very long answer, but I'll try and keep it fairly brief. You can get as complicated as you wish, but what I would do is I would recommend that somebody looks at three things. So the first one is the MNAV, really easy to work out. You can find it online. Most Bitcoin treasury companies have an analytics dashboard that you can see. What the MNAV means is very, very simply, it's the value of the Bitcoin versus the market cap. You know, maybe below 2 is pretty low, below 3 is relatively low, maybe above 5, 6, getting expensive, not financial advice. So you've got your MNAV. Then the second thing that you've got is the BTC yield. So this is really important. So a company like my company will issue equity, which increases the shares in issue. In return for doing that, it will generate capital, which in our case gets deployed into Bitcoin. So we issue shares and we buy Bitcoin. So the growth in that Bitcoin held is the BTC yield. So you're calculating the growth in the BTC versus the dilution caused by issuing the equity, which is, in very, very simple terms, made possible when the MNAV is greater than 1. Then the third thing that is something that not a lot of people talk about is the size of the company. And very, very simply, the model is ever so slightly easier the smaller the company. So if you look at, say, the market cap of the company, one of the components of your MNAV calculation, you'll be able to see the size, with the theory there being, which isn't, 100% true, that the larger you are, the harder it is to raise additional capital to make that much difference to your BTC yield and therefore MNAV.
Andrew, you and I were talking kind of earlier, and Matt, I'd like to get your perspective as well here too as the CEO of Strive. We're talking about what's valuable to shareholders, but does that necessarily align with what's valuable to you as the CEO? Like, what are you guys looking at ultimately at the end of the day to value your own companies?
Yeah, so for us, we are on a mission to outperform Bitcoin over time. Because if you aren't doing that, there's no reason to do the strategy. You should just buy a Bitcoin ETF. And so for us, it was, how do we deploy our resources? We have a very talented team. There's a lot of talented teams in this space, right? But each team, like sports teams, have different strengths, different weaknesses. And we're an asset manager. And so as an asset manager, we're used to looking for alpha strategies, meaning can you outperform Bitcoin without even taking Bitcoin specific risk? So that's the alpha side. But then on the beta side, I think the debt markets are evolving so quickly where when we announced our reverse merger in May, convertible notes were still the in way for people to get leverage, and now it's shifted to perpetual preferred equity instruments. And so we've kind of found ourselves in a position, I think, as probably the only Bitcoin treasury company that's doing a reverse merger, so as a SPAC, no debt, raised $750 million of capital. So that's become a very interesting opportunity for us to consider as we complete our merger. But that's how fast this space goes. When we were at Strategy World of the Bitcoin Conference in America, that was not a thing. And so for us, it's just being nimble, having fun, putting our brains together to make the best decision. And that'll be different for us versus Andrew versus Nakamoto. But ultimately, I think we're in the early days of figuring out different ways to increase the amount of Bitcoin per share.
Capri, as Kraken Institutional is at the front lines here with a lot of these companies who are running the Bitcoin Treasury playbook, you get to be beholden to a lot of these conversations. What's your take on all of this, and how is Kraken supporting these companies?
I think Kraken is a service provider, so we try to, even playing field. We offer custody solutions, trading solutions, and lending solutions. What I've seen that's working is traditionally, like when you buy a stock in public markets, retail, institutional, hedge funds buy a stock so the price can go up, right? So they can sell at a higher price. So I think the winners who I see in the treasury companies today are guys that have really strong marketing strategies and hit velocity. They hit velocity very early on so they can hit the ATM and keep the flywheel going. So where Kraken helps is we provide customized lending solutions where we can lend them against their, if somebody raises $750 million for Bitcoin, they can borrow from us for 1 week before they hit the ATM and increase their NAV. So Kraken as a service provider can really provide treasury companies differentiated access, increased NAV, and also like touch on tokenized stocks, MicroStrategy, NVIDIA. They can trade. They have global distribution from Kraken's X stocks. So I think from a service provider lens, I think we all these areas each play a role in having a successful treasury company.
So I want to start getting, we talked about a lot of the tangible aspects here. I want to start getting into the intangible, right? It's been very fascinating to see over the course of the last 16 months, the rise in the Bitcoin treasury company narrative. And early on, you could say, hey, we're putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet and it would do multiples of wonder for your stock performance. But I think, general sentiment has moved past that. Savvy investors are really looking at the leadership teams that are executing this playbook. And Matt, like you mentioned, Bitcoin is the hurdle rate. So you guys are looking at some of the financial engineering aspects to see how you can outperform Bitcoin as a whole to bring more value back in. So when you're looking at financing moves like convertibles, like ATMs, or even debt, how does that ultimately impact shareholder value? When are they accretive? When are they destructive?
Yeah, so first off, on the debt side, if you have perpetual preferred equity instruments, so let's say you had 30% leverage ratio and you have that embedded for your company forever, you never have to pay back the principal. If Bitcoin grows at 30% CAGR every single year on average, and your cost of capital is 10%, that just works. It doesn't matter if your MNAV is 1, it doesn't matter if it's 0.9. As long as you can meet your interest obligations, you're good. And this kind of gets into where I think the industry is going to go, is that in traditional fixed income markets, you evaluate risk typically by interest coverage ratios. How can you take your profits and cover the interest, and how many times can you do that? And when you actually put into a risk model the returns of Bitcoin and you look at leverage ratios, you see it's pretty hard to break these companies. It's possible. You can break anything, but it's pretty hard. And I think that's one of the places where I think we have a pretty strong team, just given my fixed income background. Our CFO has, investor relation and investment banking background. We have Jeff Walton, who has a reinsurance background. Traditional finance is a really strong place for us. And then you look at other companies. You look at Nakamoto, who's innovated in every single international market. That is unique and distinctive for them. It's super interesting. You look at Metaplanet, what they've done in the ARBs in Japan. It's just like different teams have found different niches to provide value. And ultimately, like, one of the things that Michael Saylor told us when we got into the space was the hardest thing for the new Bitcoin treasury companies is going to be, can you get to $1 billion? Because when you can get to $1 billion, you can finance great teams. And it's not a large cost relative to the amount of capital that you have. You're open to do things like IPOing perpetual preferred equity instruments. And so it really is a race, at least in the US markets, to get to scale. And we have a handful of companies that have done that. And then once you're there, then there's the, differentiation comes in.
Andrew, from the UK side, would like to get your take on this, especially as, Smarter Webco has a very interesting, rise to fame here, starting out as a small cap pubco you guys IPO'd back in April, and to go instantly from a $3 million market cap to, I think it was, upwards of almost $1 billion, right? And then an MNAV at one point of 14x, which is crazy. People must have been thinking, like, what is Andrew doing? Is this reckless? But you're very smart, you're tactful, you're reserved. How are you analyzing risk on your end?
Yeah, so what we've done since the start is we've just stuck to our strategy. The most important thing that you can do as a public company, in my opinion, is to put the shareholders first. So since before we IPO'd to the IPO and every day thereafter, we've made every decision with them front and center. Clearly there is some risk if you invest in a Bitcoin treasury company. I have almost 100% exposure to Bitcoin and Bitcoin treasury companies, but I wouldn't be comfortable, or put another way, I would always do my best to communicate the risks. As an example, in the UK, we were the first company to clearly specify the risks in every single announcement that goes out. If somebody can understand the risks, then in our opinion, these things are the very best valued equities in the whole world. When we look at, the MNAVs, that a lot of them are trading in, quite a few different locations, the period that they will earn back that Bitcoin for the investor is absurd when you compare it to traditional metrics like PE metrics. So that's all we do. We try and make every decision based on the investor. Ultimately, they are the people that own the company. They are the reason why I listed my business, because I wanted the business to invest that did it this way. And then we just try our best.
Gurpreet, you and I were chatting earlier about the importance of brand value and how that accelerates brand velocity. And Kraken's always been kind of at the forefront of that. What lessons can you kind of share with the crowd here? And maybe even Matt and Andrew on the importance of that.
Kraken is one of the biggest supporters for Bitminer, Tom Lee, and we believe that's probably, after MicroStrategy, the best executed treasury company. And what we learned is that velocity, knowing when to hit the ATM, and understanding lockups, right? For investors, like MNAV can be a fictitious number, right? Because if your shares are locked, your stock price rips when the product gets listed. So I think, understanding how to touch the ATMs, understanding capital markets, understanding structure is very, very important. So it goes back to, right, when you start off, you need velocity to hit the game, right? Like institutions, hedge funds, pensions, endowments, they'll not invest in the 10th Bitcoin strategy company. So I think figuring out how to be the top 5 is very important to be succeed in the long term.
Maybe just, a little bit of controversy is fun here. So I think that brand value is important, and you've seen that with Tom Lee's company, but I have to call out, Ethereum makes for a horrible asset for a treasury company. And oh my gosh, why?
Everybody get a round of applause here real quick, come on.
Because Bitcoin perpetually goes up versus fiat currencies because they're being debased. Ethereum is like a company, and a perpetual strategy as a treasury asset to buy Ethereum or Solana or Dogecoin or Pepe coin, I don't really care. It's building a house on sand. And so the brand can accumulate the coin quickly, it can make the coin go up, but ultimately, Tom better start buying some Bitcoin, or I think his days are numbered.
Practice service provider, so no comment. We support everybody.
So, gentlemen, we're coming up here on time. 30 seconds, final take. How do you value a Bitcoin treasury company? Andrew, final words.
So look at the MNAV, look at the yield, and then look at the size of it. Remember the three things that I said, and then just do your research further after that.
I mean, Kraken's a service provider. You know, we want strong teams. We're long Bitcoin. We support everybody that's in the ecosystem. So we'll, you know, through our platform, we'll back everybody.
Tom's a smart guy. I followed him for years. I like him. I just don't like Ethereum as a treasury asset, but agree. I think it's great you guys provide the service for everyone.
Gentlemen, I appreciate the time. We're at time here. Thank you very much. And Hong Kong, thank you. We'll see you later tonight.
I'm Simon Garovich, president of Metaplanet. The global financial system is broken. Where can you build long-term value when every system is stacked against you? A year ago, we were running a struggling hotel company in Japan. So we flipped the model. We made Bitcoin our core reserve asset. Everything we do flows into a single goal, increasing Bitcoin per share. Today, we've become Asia's leading Bitcoin treasury company and the top performing listed equity in the world. Now, most companies fear volatility, but we harness it. Very few companies globally are compounding value at this pace and at this scale, and we have no intention of taking our foot off the gas. We believe we can redefine the market from the ground up, and our goal is to become the most held stock in Japan.
I've got a dear friend. He spoke on the stage before, Simon from Metaplan, and I asked him, what's the hardest problem? And he goes, honestly, we're running out of Bitcoin.
That's the Bitcoin effect, and this is just the beginning.
Welcome back. We are here for our final fireside chat of the day. It is my pleasure to welcome to the stage my co-founder, CEO of Kindly MD and Nakamoto, David Bailey, and Mr. Eric Trump, Executive Vice President of the Trump Organization. Please join me in welcoming David and Eric.
Wow. Do you think Bitcoin's popular? I only see one mic up here. I think I should have maybe grabbed one more. Oops. All right, everyone. We have quite the discussion for you today. And, I wanted to start by sharing just a little piece of history. So last year when we did this conference here in Hong Kong, I got a phone call that said, there's a meeting that's going to happen in 2 weeks at Trump Tower to talk about Bitcoin, and that you have to go buy a suit right away. And so 2 weeks later we went and we made the case for Bitcoin, and that set in motion a chain reaction that now brings Eric to Hong Kong, has put a Bitcoin at 100K. It's kind of been a big deal. Let's go. So I wanted to start. Well, first off, one thing. You know, I get asked by the media all the time, like, does the president only like Bitcoin because he wants to get votes? Like, I thought that was the whole point of running for office, is you're trying to get votes, you're trying to do things that are popular. But I think one thing I respect about your dad, who's done an incredible job. By the way, can we just get a round of applause for the President of the United States? So one of the things that I respect so much about your dad is that he's an entrepreneur through and through. He sees opportunity where other people don't, like a true entrepreneur does. And he saw something here that he thought was worth taking a bet on. And you know, I wanted to start by just hearing a little bit of the backstory, not just of your father, but for you, Eric, and how you got into Bitcoin.
Well, first of all, Hong Kong, we absolutely love you. Thank you for this incredible reception. Look at this place. This is unbelievable. It's off the charts.
It's like a rock concert.
The hospitality you've shown me since we've come into town has been unbelievable, guys, and I'm truly indebted, and we love it. Which brings me to another special person, David, and he's too humble to say this, but you know, we were getting debanked as a family, and I tell this story every single time I'm on stage, but because my father was a political guy, we were getting debanked by the biggest financial institutions in the United States. I'll never forget it. And all of a sudden, we started meeting all these incredible people in cryptocurrency. One of the people we met was David Bailey. And he asked my dad, he calls my dad one day, and he goes, and I told this story to a different group a minute ago over there, but he calls my father and he said, I want you to speak at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville. And my father calls me up, he goes, hey, what do you know about this Bitcoin thing? I mean, obviously I believe in digital assets, but do you think I should speak at it? And I said, absolutely, you have to speak at the conference. And David Bailey was the first person who invited the now president of the United States, before he was president, before in fact the media even gave him a shot at winning, to speak on a stage. And the community, the Bitcoin community embraced him. The Bitcoin community embraced my father, unlike anything I had ever seen before. And I hope that's paid off in spades, because we love this community. We believe in this community. 90% of my time in life is in this community now. It is the greatest asset in the world. And we are changing finance. We are changing modern day banking. We're changing modern day finance. It's the greatest store of value that's arguably ever been created. And guys, I'm telling you, you're gonna look back in 3 years and 5 years and 10 years, the people in this room are the true pioneers of the space, and all of it's because of this man right here. And so David, we love you, we appreciate you. And thank you for starting this journey for a lot of people, including my family and including so many people in this room.
Wow, well, I just want to say, Eric, you are the top diplomat of the Bitcoin nation. And the Bitcoin nation is in every country on the planet. This is the Bitcoin nation, so good job, sir. Let's jump into business, okay? You've dived headfirst into this. You've gotten involved in some entrepreneurial endeavors. Metaplanet, I think, first and foremost, we were supposed to be joined today actually by Simon up here, but for some things we won't go into, he can't join us. Talk about your involvement with Metaplanet.
So where is Simon, first of all? He was right here. I saw him a second ago. Where's Simon? Simon, stand up, buddy. Come here, come do a little victory lap over here. What this guy has done for Bitcoin in Asia is unbelievable. I mean, he is the Michael Saylor of Asia. He's a wonderful guy, a guy who's become a dear friend of mine, and he called me a year or two ago and he goes, Eric, would you like to become involved with the company? And I said, I'd absolutely be honored to. And I couldn't be more proud to stand by his side. You know, he has single-handedly changed not only Japan in terms of the way they looked at digital assets, but a lot of Asia, and he deserves tremendous credit. So to our good friend, we absolutely, we love you. You're great.
So there's Metaplanet, but there's also American Bitcoin. Talk about American Bitcoin.
So American Bitcoin, I've got our great partner, one of my great partners, Asher here, and Mike Ho. Asher's over there. But listen, I think if you know there's a family that loves America, I love the entire world, but if you know there's a family that's truly American to the core, it's ours. We've got some of the cheapest energy in the world in America, in Texas, and we developed a company called American Bitcoin. We are one of the biggest Bitcoin mining companies on earth. We mine about 3% of the world's Bitcoin every single day. We're about to go public on the NASDAQ very soon, coming up. And you know, our rough cost per energy per mining a Bitcoin is about $37,000, right? And on an asset that's trading at, what is it today, $113,000. And so we're doing the Bitcoin mining game as well as anybody on earth, better than anybody on earth. And at the same time, we're doing kind of a strategy model on the other side. And so we could not be more proud to launch this incredible endeavor. I think we're going to be one of the greatest Bitcoin companies anywhere in the world. But what's so cool is you have this across the board. You've got the Simons leading the way. You've got the Davids leading the way. You've got American Bitcoin that's going to lead the way. You have Michael Saylor with obviously strategy. You know, he's obviously, you know, truly leading the way by what he's done. You've got nation states that are buying the hell out of Bitcoin. You've got Fortune 500 companies that are buying the hell out of Bitcoin. I mean, you've got the biggest families. You've got the biggest companies on earth that believe in this digital store of value. Everybody wants Bitcoin. Everybody is buying Bitcoin. And that's an incredible thing. And that's why I've always said that I really believe in the next several years, Bitcoin hits $1 million. There's no question Bitcoin hits $1 million. And when you're in the room with certain people, and I had breakfast this morning with, you know, a couple of the most powerful people in the region in the hospitality space, and you're literally sitting there trying to explain to them what digital currency is, you realize how early we all are to this race and how big of a benefit that is, right? I hear from people all the time, you know, should I get into cryptocurrency? Did I miss it? Am I too late? And I literally start laughing at them. I go, we haven't even scratched the surface of what Bitcoin is going to be. We haven't even scratched the surface of what digital assets are going to be. This is the time to buy. Volatility is your friend. Buy right now. Shut your eyes. Hold it for the next 5 years, and you are going to do terrifically well. And so it's been so much fun. Guys, it's been so much fun.
You know, I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this question, so you may not have an answer off the cuff, but you know, when I think about who gets in the room with the most interesting, wealthiest, most powerful people in the world, I really couldn't imagine anyone more than the Trump family who is in those rooms. As you've been on this journey, what's the most interesting things you've heard from people? I mean, you're talking to the most powerful families in China, you know, but you've been to many countries to talk about Bitcoin. What surprised you the most?
Well, listen, I had one person who runs a major country tell me that they literally take the entire energy supply of a major city in the middle of a winter and use it to mine Bitcoin because that's how much they believe in the asset, right? And so, you know, I'm not going to tell you which country it is or who it was, but what I can tell you is there are sovereign wealth funds who really believe in it. You've got the biggest families who believe in it. You've got the biggest banks that believe in it. You've got accumulators that believe in it. And more, you have retail consumers that are starting to understand it, but not only understand it. I think there's a lot of people who understand what Bitcoin is and what cryptocurrency is, but never really had the access to it, right? Every single day, it's becoming more accessible to the everyday person. It's easier to get. It's starting to be custody at major financial institutions all over the world. The exchanges are getting better and getting more user-friendly. I used to be the guy who, you know, coming out of the hospitality business would yell at the exchanges saying, it's too difficult. You're making it, you know, on DeFi, you're making it too difficult to ultimately buy cryptocurrency, and it's literally holding back the masses. The exact opposite's happening. You know, another thing that I'm working on is a company called World Liberty Financial. But I mean, we're literally trying to get cryptocurrency to the masses. We're trying to bring hospitality to cryptocurrency. And more people are finding their inroads into being able to buy it and being able to purchase it. In America, people are buying it for the retirement plans for the first time. It just became available. So you've got trillions of dollars of liquidity that's opening up that are allowing digital assets in for the first time. You've got BlackRock, you've got all the biggest banks in the world that are buying it, right? You've got all the major companies in the world that are holding it on their treasury of their companies, right? And they're not letting it go. Those retirement accounts are not letting Bitcoin go. Those companies are not letting Bitcoin go. Those sovereign wealth funds are not letting Bitcoin go. And there's only 21 million coins. It's the only commodity in the entire world that they're not creating more of. I mean, if gold ever goes to $20,000 an ounce, I'm gonna knock down this damn building and I'll find gold in that column right there. Like we'll find it. That can't happen with cryptocurrency. That can't happen with Bitcoin. It's finite. And that's what makes it so damn powerful. And being in the room with those people, including the people this morning who are all of a sudden intrigued and you better believe are gonna go off and start buying Bitcoin. Again, the people that are in it now, the people that are buying soon, those are the people who are going to win the race, because those markets, those capital markets, are opening every single day and just making it more accessible to the masses that want the greatest asset that's arguably ever been created.
So in Nashville, your father promised to make America the Bitcoin superpower of the world. And he laid out a pretty ambitious timeline. You know, I think some people were skeptical he could get it done. And then he's proceeded to just knock it down one after another. We just got the stable coin bill passed. We got the SBR signed into, or I mean, he's done so many things. It's kind of wild. You know, we're here in Hong Kong today. I don't know if it's, you know, if I should say this, but, you know, the other Bitcoin superpower in the world is China. You know, it's one of the biggest markets for Bitcoin, Bitcoin miners, Bitcoin users, Bitcoin held. You know, how do you compare, you know, what America's doing on the policy front and you know, what is coming next, and, you know, where the other Bitcoin superpowers of the world are on their policy side?
Well, listen, congratulations to everybody in here, because there's no question that you have made an unbelievable mark on Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. There's no question that China is a hell of a power when it comes to this world and doing it well. By the way, I give the same credit to the Middle East. I mean, the Middle East has really embraced cryptocurrency in a massive way, and they are running fast in that endeavor. And by the way, there's a couple small countries in South America. They don't have the buying power. They don't have the GDP. They don't have the true monetary means. But what's equally as important is they have a hell of a lot of heart and soul, and they believe in it. And so what they lack maybe in terms of monetary resources, they certainly made up for in spirit. But you know, again, not to try and ever play, you know, one country against another. You know, I do believe, because my father really believes in digital assets, and you know, he took over from a totally incompetent president. I can say that Biden was totally incompetent. All of a sudden, he's changed the trajectory of America 180 degrees, and he did so instantly. The second he got into office, he embraced the digital revolution, because he understands that that's the future of finance. And so we went from 0 to 100 instantaneously. I mean, I think in terms of America, I think we've made more progress in terms of digital assets in the last 7 months under his presidency than we probably did in the 10 previous years. And the reality is the entire world is following. You know, so much of the world looks to America to lead the way on so many issues, and then they use that as a little bit of a roadmap to either to emulate or to chart a path, albeit they might diverge slightly. And what he's done has really kind of transformed America. And I really do believe the United States right now is winning the digital revolution only because you have somebody that's so committed to its success, somebody who truly, truly believes, somebody who owned the asset long before that they were president, who saw the vision, but also somebody that had every bank and financial institution so weaponized against them that it forced them in. People always ask me, you know, if the banks hadn't gone after your family, if they hadn't shut down all your accounts, do you think you'd be doing this? And I said, I don't think I'd be here. I think I'd still be building every single hotel around the world and in every market. And by the way, I still do a lot of that. But I don't think I would have fallen into cryptocurrency the same way. It was a combination of them canceling the hell out of us, them coming after us relentlessly simply because my father was in politics, combined with the fact that they were going after all of you. So many people in this room, they were going after you. And guess what? I started meeting some of the greatest people I've ever met in my life who are incredibly honest, who believe in the future, who believe in technology, who are great people, who wanted to build dynamic companies that could, transform the future of life. And they treated you like dogs. They treated you like hell for no reason whatsoever. And they were doing the same to our family. They were doing the same to us. And so, they often say kind of the enemy of your enemy is actually your friend. That's how the Trump family became friends with this community. The enemy of your enemy actually became your friend. And, as you talk to these people, you realize how brilliant they were. As you talk to these people, you realize how antiquated the old financial system was, right? Where at 4:59 on a Friday afternoon, you can no longer send money until the next Monday, which if you're very lucky, might actually get to the intended recipient by Monday afternoon or Tuesday. That's not the modern world. Give me a break. That's not, finance has to be 24/7, 7 days a week. That's what people expect. That's what people demand. And we're changing that every single day. And so the road's been beautiful. The road's been something I would have never guessed in my wildest dreams. If David could have brought me back 10 years, no way would I ever have thought I would have been here. But it's also probably been the most rewarding venture of my entire life.
So your father's put Bitcoin on the global stage, and I have this perspective that money bounds people together, and so the Bitcoin nation, no matter where you live in the world, there's a common bond, and I think there's a big future for Bitcoin as it comes to diplomacy. And so I got a question this morning that I wanted to ask you in that regard from a CNN journalist that's here. Your father and President Xi are going to be sitting down to talk at some point soon. Is Bitcoin going to be one of the topics they talk about?
Never really expected that question. I don't know if they. Hey, listen.